Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So have you ever wondered how to produce an indie rock song? Like, what are the components? What are the things that I need to do to achieve that sound? Well, if that's you, then my friend, you've come to the right place, because by the end of this video, you will have learned the 5 key components to producing an indie rock song. So let's jump right in. Now I'm going to be using Phoebe Bridgers, or a remake of Phoebe Bridgers' song Kyoto, to illustrate and demonstrate everything that I'm showing you throughout this video. So that sounds like this. Day off in Kyoto, got bored at the temple, looked around at 7-Eleven. And then when the chorus hits, I'm gonna kill you if you don't beat me to it. Dreaming through Tokyo sky. Right, so this is that sort of dry indie rock, authentic type of sound that we want to achieve. So how can we go about it? What's the process? What does this look like? Well, I have narrowed it down to 5 key components. So let's dive in. So key component number 1 to an indie rock song is you want dry acoustic drums with a warm analog sound. So you can use like VST drums. I'm using addictive drums, and remember, we're going for dry. We don't want a drum preset or a drum kit that has a ton of compression or room reverb or a bunch of effects on it. We want a very basic sounding drum kit. And so what I did here is I went through Fairfax Volume 2. It's just a pack inside of Addictive Drums, and it was like the first one that I clicked on is Dry Room. Sounds pretty close to what we're aiming for, and voila, it was. And so let me solo this without any of the plugins on here, which we'll dive into these here in a second. So this is what it sounds like straight out of Addictive Drums. Very basic, right? Now I did do a couple edits within the software here. I turned on the tape and shape, which I love this little feature inside of Addictive Drums. It adds, here's without it. Warms it up, gives it some tape saturation. Love that. So everything else is pretty much the same. I may have done some slight adjustments, but nothing too crazy. It's a very basic preset, guys. It's nothing fancy, nothing insane going on here. So if you have Addictive Drums, Easy Drummer, Steven Slate, whatever you might have on hand, or even a loop. You could even use an acoustic loop that works for the song. That works as well. The key is you want a very dry, basic drum sound to begin with. Now remember, this is only half of the goal here, which was what? Dry acoustic drums, right? So check. But what was the other half? We want an analog, that warm analog sound. So one of the best ways to do that is combining Addictive Drums with the classic RC20, which these are made by the same company, Excellent Audio. And RC20 is the perfect plugin if you want to make anything warm and analog sounding. So here is with RC20. I just went with a Vinyl 1 preset inside of this plugin, and then I made some slight adjustments, and here's what it sounds like. And here's without it. Notice how it's kind of bright, it's a bit more flat, but it becomes more tapey and focused and analog sounding when I turn it on, right? It's very nice. Love that. And then I have a little bit of compression. So this is from the Fat channel inside of Studio One. So this is like an analog modeled compressor. It's the Brit Comp, and I love using this particular compressor on drums. And it's not doing a ton. It's very light, very subtle. Again, we're not aiming for crazy compression on these types of indie rock drum sounds. You don't want like a snare drum to be very elongated with really heavy compression settings, right? You want it to, as soon as the snare hits, you don't want that long release or that long decay. You want it to kind of cut and be done. Boop-ka, boop-ka, not boop-ka. You know, none of that. It's very basic and dry. So then I have saturation on here. This is again to add a little bit of grit. So we've already added some distortion within the RC20. We've already added some tape saturation inside the Addictive Drums plugin itself. Now we're adding a bit more saturation. So layer in a couple of like saturation, maybe some tube distortion, whatever you might have on hand. Even just using stock plugins you can get a great sound by using whatever you might have. You don't even need to buy anything. And so with everything together, it sounds like this, and then I'll turn off all the inserts and flip back and forth. And there's without any of the plugins on it. Beautiful, right? It's very warm. It's very nice. There's one thing I forgot to mention here. Inside of the RC20 plugin, I do have a cut. So I've got the EQ cut, the high cut filter, filtered out on the top end, all the way down to like 6K, which is a big deal because that gives it, when you filter off the top end, it's almost like you're putting a blanket over it, right? So it gives it a little bit more of this and less of this. And when you're talking about analog, warm sounding drums, that's the perfect move. Right? In the mix, it's just nice. And then we're going into the chorus. We can turn it up so you can hear a little better. So that is key component number 1, dry acoustic drums with a warm analog sound. Key component number 2 is you want a blanketed vocal sound. Notice how I keep using the word blanket, blanketed, warm, analog. That is often what you want for most kind of the generic, especially the Phoebe Bridgers style of indie rock. It's almost muffled. It's like someone put a blanket over the entire track. And this is specifically and especially true on the vocals, which you maybe wouldn't expect because conventional wisdom would say you want your vocals to be bright and cut through the mix, right? Well, it's a bit more subtle than that when you're talking about this style of indie rock. And no, I'm not going to walk you through this entire chain because that's not what we're talking about here. But if you do want to learn more about vocal EQ and vocal compression, I've got 2 free guides that you can download. I'll link to both of them below. One of them is my visual guide for fixing vocal EQ problems. The other one is my indie vocals compression guide. And so those will both really help you to get some clarity and to stop guessing and actually make EQ and compression moves to get your songs and your vocals especially to sound more professional and to get them Spotify ready. So I'll leave a link to both of those free guides below, so feel free to check those out. So what we're focusing on here is more the EQ side of it and how do you get that filtered out blanketed sound. And that is actually mostly what's happening with this vocal. It's very basic. It's EQ, compression, and a little bit of RC20 to add that warm analog flavor, right? Other than that, a little bit of slap delay, that's basically it. So notice the EQ. This is the EQ, the main EQ that I have on this vocal. Look at this. Look at all of these cuts happening here. We've got a roll off all the way down to about 9K with a high cut. We've got a big cut. This is about 4 dB right in the heart of that 4K range where you get all the brightness in the vocal. You got a massive narrow cut in the 2K range, that's more of a personal thing for my voice in particular. I like to do that to get rid of that harshness in the 2K range. But you combine those 3 together, and this is the sound you get. 11. But if you take the EQ off, oh, it's nice and bright, right? Thing is, go listen to Phoebe Bridgers in her style of indie rock. It's not that bright. It's much more like this. Whoops. It's much more like this. So that is a big key. Now, this will depend how much you EQ out that high end. Will depend on your voice, the microphone. Like if you're using a dynamic microphone, probably don't want to cut it as much as you would if you're using a condenser microphone. But that is a big key here. You want it to almost feel like there's a blanket over the vocal and it has that very warm analog type of sound. Now, key component number 3 to an indie rock song, and we're sticking with the vocal here, is no long reverbs on the vocal. If you're going to use reverbs, make them very short, so short room reverbs, short plates, and slap delays. Those are the reverbs. If you're going to add some space and dimension, go for those. Don't add a 4 to 5 second hall or church reverb for this type of sound. It's probably not going to work in this sonic landscape if you want this indie rock sound. what I did here, the only space that is on the lead vocal, the only reverb or delay plugin that I'm sending the vocal to is a slap delay. So I have a slap delay set up on my return track over here, and it's a very basic slap delay with the left and the right being slightly offset, feedback at 0, just basic slap delay settings. I do have the EQ or the high cut on the EQ pretty far down, all the way down to 2K, so it's a very warm slap delay. Warm being the keyword we're making basically everything warm for this style, right? So here's what the slap delay sounds like if I turn it up. It sounds like a room, essentially, right? It just sounds like you're in a very small room. There's without it. So it gives that just ever so slightly some real world ambience, but it's not a 4-second reverb. It's not a big lush reverb. This is indie rock. This is that intimate, dry sound. So keep it there. Don't try and get too fancy with your reverbs and delays. And there's not even delay on here. There's no quarter note delay. This is very dry and very straightforward. Now, key component number 4 is you want a simple yet interesting guitar and bass arrangement. Now, the guitar, let's just start with the bass, because the bass guitar here is very simple. It's very straightforward. It's basically following the kick drum. If I solo the drums and the bass, notice how the bass and the drums, or the bass and the kick drum, are virtually doing the same thing. Right? So the kick is basically playing a 4 on the floor, except when the snare hits. So it's, and then I have the bass guitar mirroring what the kick drum is doing, which is very often a great move. So now let's dive into the guitars. How do you arrange guitars for this type of indie rock sound? Well, here's one way of going about it. So we've got an acoustic guitar, which I have at like the intro section, right? And that's great because it adds that very nice dynamic, and it very soft, and then everything comes in, right? I love that. So just a very basic acoustic guitar can be great for this style. And then what I have here is an electric guitar down the middle, an electric guitar on the left, and an electric guitar on the right. These are 3 separate takes. The one in the center basically mirrors what the acoustic guitar is doing. Right? It's that simple. Now we have left and right. Now these are a bit more, I've got some extra distortion on these, a bit more drive, and I'm riffing a bit. Now, the left and the right, I'm going to play both the left and the right together because they are doing similar things, right? Where we have kind of a muted sound and then it opens up, in and, goes in and out. Right? You've got some dynamics there. And one little thing that I did here as well is the guitar on the left, I had the capo on the 1st fret, and I played E shape, so this song is in the key of F. Well, I'd turn it to the key of F. Phoebe's, I think, is in the key of B, but in order to fit my range, I went with the key of F. So the guitar on the left is playing capo 1, the guitar on the right is playing capo on the 5th fret, and I'm playing the C shapes. So that in of itself gives it a different sort of sound, and I also have different amp settings and presets on each guitar. That way you get maximum variation, and it just sounds better that way. One more thing I want you to notice here about these guitars, especially the left and the right ones, is I pretty much just started recording and then grooved with it and then kept it. As long as there's nothing distracting going on. You do not want to aim for some sort of perfection for this type of sound, right? I guess they're pretty much mirroring each other there, right? But even there, it's imperfect. You're just kind of playing it, you're grooving, you're playing along with the song. And if you play it back in the mix and everything sounds great, then it sounds great. Don't try to fix problems that you hear in solo if those problems aren't even present in the final mix. You know what I mean? Because what this also does is it will help infuse your song with a bit more of that organic quality, where it is like you picked up your guitar and you recorded a take and you were like, yep, it's good. It sounds great. It's essentially what you did. That's why it sounds that way. And so that's just a little tip is don't aim for perfection every time, especially for when you're stacking things and layering things. Allow for a bit of freedom and these unexpected intricacies to just happen, and that creativity to just happen, because you can get some very interesting sounds when you take that approach rather than trying to be overly perfectionistic. All right, one more to go, and this is my favorite one of all. So the fifth key component to an indie rock song is what I'm calling the chorus triad. I forgot what it's called. The chorus triad energy lift. Now this is a very simple concept. What I mean is when the chorus hits, you're essentially adding 3 elements. One down the middle, one on the left, one on the right. For this song, what we're adding down the middle are 2 doubles. You have the lead vocal that basically stays the same, but then I recorded 2 additional takes, and yes, I kept them mono. I didn't spread them out left and right, and it gives it that very focused sound, which allows for more separation in a sense because you've got the guitars and the rest of the instrumentation that has more of a stereo spread. So that's down the middle. On the left, when the chorus hits, you've got that trumpet sound, and on the right, you've got a harmony vocal. So listen to all of those 3 things, that triad that is being added when the chorus hits. Doubles down the middle, trumpet on the left, harmony vocal on the right. Right? That's so cool. So there's the trumpet sound, right? It's a very basic sound, and then I went, then you have the doubles, right? If you don't beat me to it. Again, those are down the middle, not doing it the perhaps normal way or the way you would expect with one left and one right. No, I kept them mono, and then that you have the harmony on the right. Dreaming through Tokyo skies. Now, I did kind of wing this, so I do have some auto-tune on there, because when I make these remakes, I don't try to be perfect. I try to slap them together as quickly as possible to conserve time. But I've got some extra plugins. I've got saturation, I've got a bunch of reverb on it, and some EQ to filter off those highs so it gives it a warm flavor. Notice though, just how powerful that is. This idea, or this way of approaching this, it's like when the chorus hits, what are you going to add? And this could be the perfect answer for you. Add something down the middle, in this case, doubles. Add something on the left, in this case, that trumpet sound. Add something on the right, in this case, that harmony vocal with some extra effects and space and reverb on it. That is all you need. We're not adding 6 different things to add energy. You only need 1, 2, or 3 things in every section to really add the lift. Especially when you consider in that the drums in of themselves are adding some energy by playing in a more upbeat or interesting way. There's more energy for the drums, right? But everything else is pretty much the same. We're just adding in those couple extra elements. So implement that. Those are the 5 key components of an indie rock song. So let's just run through them one more time real quick. You have the dry acoustic drums with a warm analog sound. That's key number 1. Key component 2 is a blanketed vocal sound. Key component number 3, no long reverbs on the vocals, so just use slap delays or short reverbs if you want to add dimension. Number 4, simple yet interesting guitar and bass arrangements. And number 5, the chorus triad energy lift. So my friend, thank you so much for watching. I really hope it was helpful. If you want to dive deeper and you want to learn more about EQ and compression, like I mentioned earlier, I've got 2 free guides that are really going to help you out. So you can pick either one, you can download both, why not? And it's really going to help you up your game and get you some clarity on how to properly EQ your vocals and and compress your vocals as well. So be sure to download those. Link is in the description. They're 100% free and they're really going to help you out. So thank you so much for watching, my friend. I will see you in the next video again real soon. See ya.